Well, I'm so glad y'all are here today. I know you've all paid a lot of money to be here today, and we want to make sure you get your money's worth in the workshops later and everything else. But I wanted to introduce our day with some opening thoughts that I think are extremely important, and especially important to people like you and like me who do anything remotely related to selling. Selling has a bad name today, and I just marvel at that because almost everyone is a salesman. If you're a kindergarten teacher, you're selling little tiny people on the benefits of reading and writing and math. If you are a college professor, you're doing the same thing to hopefully slightly more mature people. If you're a doctor, you're teaching people nutrition and you're teaching them good health habits. If you are in any walk of life, you are a persuader. And a persuader is just a salesman. A salesman is a persuader. A persuader is someone who is trying to help someone else through understanding something that they don't presently understand. And that's what a salesman does. So we want to preface today's action with a little bit of talk about what that is and why it matters, and perhaps why some people look down on it and why they shouldn't. I think the most important thing that you can walk away with today is an understanding that what you do is really the noblest of all professions. And I have a book coming out on that called The Noblest Profession, and I hope y'all get a copy. But the noblest of professions, why do I say that? And it really comes down to one key idea. The salesman is embodying at a very high societal level the ideas of the golden rule. Now at this point somebody usually jokes, oh yeah, he who has the gold makes the rules. And you know, maybe in some circumstances that's true. But that of course is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is that ancient idea that you should do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And more than that, in certainly my faith background, that you should love your neighbor as yourself. Now, what does that have to do with selling? I want to tell you it has absolutely everything to do with selling. If people think today about salespeople, they generally think negative thoughts, and that is a horrific mistake. They are thinking perhaps about their personal experience, maybe at a car lot sometime where some guy in a Herb Tarlett coat, is trying to get them to overlook, something about a used car. And that's what they think about. They think about dickering, and they don't want to do that, or they think about something about the process that bothers them. That's not where the focus should lie. The focus is really about the other person's problem that's being solved in that moment. Now, I'm not saying that every salesman does this well or that every salesman does this artfully, but let's think about the other side of that equation. Let's think about the exact situation I just gave you where you're buying the used car. We think about the salesman trying to get you to do something, but we often forget that the person who's in that situation has a desperate need for $3,000 transportation in a world where cars cost $15,000 to $20,000 on a good day. We forget that part. Of course, the buyer isn't going to get a Mercedes for his $3,000, at least not a new one. Of course, he's not going to get the perfect automobile. But in that moment, in that crucial moment, let's take an omniscient view and let's look at what's really going on in his mind. He's not there buying a $3,000 car for funnies. He's there because he is in desperate need of transportation. And that's all the resources he has. On the other side of the equation, that salesman is trying to put food on his family's table too. That salesman is trying to take care of Johnny's college or Susie's braces too. So on both sides, you have a need that is met by the other where they end up richer than either of them were before the trade. The buyer ends up with something that is much more valuable than his $3,000. He's able to take that car to work. He's able to get his children to school. He's able to do the things that he would otherwise be prevented from doing that make his life possible. The salesman, likewise, doesn't need the used car. He probably doesn't even own the car. He needs the money. He needs to be able to take care of his family. And having the car impoverishes him. The buyer is enriched by having it. They both gain. Folks, that is the golden rule. Maybe you never thought about it that way. But the fact is that in a system of free exchange, absent some kind of fraud, absent some kind of deceit, and we live in a world now with internet tools and all kinds of ways to mitigate the possibility of that. Today, we have the ability in nearly every trade for you to make the world a little bit better. That's an incredible thing. And the only way that we bound this is by what it is you're engaged in. What is it that you're trying to sell? Are you the kindergarten teacher trying to sell a child reading? Are you the scientist trying to cure polio or cancer or some other dread disease? Are you the person who is building the rockets like my former colleague Elon Musk, who is building the rockets that are going to take humanity to the stars? What are you engaged in? And whatever it is, there are two sides of the trade, and both of those sides get richer every time you act. It's the noblest of professions. It's one of the few things in life that is, in fact, the exact opposite of zero sum. It's exhilarating. Selling is about the golden rule. Not all salesmen know or follow the golden rule, but you today, in your workshops and in everything that you do from this day forward, as you consider that, as you internalize that, as you realize the need to stand in the other man's shoes, to understand his needs, and to meet them, you will find more and more repeat business, more and more repeat customers, more and more satisfaction in your work, better margins, better sales, and in all things, a better world. It's just staggering. And it's awesome. Look, it doesn't surprise me a lot that people would look down on selling in our time, because selling is sort of the tip of the spear of capitalism. And capitalism is really looked down upon in our time by a lot of people. And honestly, that's another thing I don't fully understand. That just floors me. The Economist did a story here a year or so ago in which they demonstrated that 1 billion people, that's 1 billion people, billion with a B, have been lifted out of extreme poverty in the last 20 years purely because of free markets. And it's always easy to find the downside to this or that. Joseph Schumpeter, in his famous Capitalism, Socialism, and Democracy, talks about creative destruction. And it always stinks to be on the destruction end of the creation. I understand that. I grew up in a small town. I saw when Walmart came in and and some of the smaller shops went out. That's hard. But the other side of the coin was that for most people, they were now able to get better products at a cheaper price. They had more money in their pocket to be able to do the things that their families needed. There was a process there that radically improved lifestyles of many, many people. And so if we over-focus on the downside of a process such as all those poor buggy makers who are out of business because of Henry Ford, or all of those poor train makers who are out of business because of the airlines, or all of those poor people who used to treat polio victims who are out of business because Jonas Salk invented the polio vaccine, we kind of miss the point. A lot of things in life exist because they are compensating for something terrible. And as you do what you do, as you solve people's problems, they have more and more ability to go on to the next thing and do things they never dreamed of before. Johnny doesn't necessarily go to the community college like his daddy did. He goes to Harvard. Johnny's daddy didn't go to college at all. As you solve people's problems, you give them more resources, you give them more ability to be more of what they are. That's what the free market is. That's what selling is, really. And it's a glorious thing. It truly is. It's founded on an idea that is not common to our way of thinking. Michael Ignatieff, a few years ago, wrote a book called The Needs of Strangers, and that's really what it is. Selling focuses your attention on the other person in a way that is not historically normal. Normally, we have thought in terms of our own family, or the clan, or the tribe, or a nation state, but not ever on anyone unfamiliar. There's basically no conflict in the history of the world that doesn't come down to some level of fear. Fear of the other. Fear of what they might do. Fear of how they might hurt us. What resources do they have that they could use against me and mine? Selling breaks that down. Selling forces you, again, to think in terms of, who is that guy right there? What does he need? What is he missing? Does he have a problem? What problems does he have? How could I solve that problem? What do I have that could solve that problem? What idea do I have that if I spent some money and hired some guys to help me do some research, what if we got a group of us together and had a bunch of ideas and we came up with a way to market our solution and we took it to him? Would that make his life better? The salesman, the entrepreneur, does all of those things tirelessly, relentlessly, endlessly before he ever even has a chance to make a sale. Isn't that incredible? And when he goes to you, ma'am, and he says, I have this great solution. Let me explain to you my solution. Let me tell you about this problem and how I can solve it for you. It's her. It's this lady who gets to decide whether she buys it or doesn't. Because, of course, you're not the only person thinking this way, are you? No, there are a whole bunch of other salesmen. There are a whole bunch of other innovators. There are a whole bunch of other entrepreneurs, and they're all trying to do the exact same thing. Figure out her problem and solve it. When they do that, they're competing for her business, yes, but they're also competing to make her world better. and their own world better at the same time. So when you go to her, she has choices in a way that no one ever had choices before. I don't know about y'all, but some of you probably, like me, grew up watching Little House on the Prairie. They went down to Nellie Olson's parents' store. It was the only store in town. It had what it had. If you didn't get what you got there, you didn't get it at all. If you wanted to go anywhere else, it was a several-day ride on a wagon down to wherever it was they went. I don't remember the name of the town. And you just didn't have that option. My grandfather tells me about growing up in Mansfield, Arkansas, which today is like a 30-minute drive up a 4-lane highway from Fort Smith, which is a pretty big town by Arkansas standards, and they would literally get in a wagon and they would ride for 2 days, stay in town for a few days, and come home for 2 days, and they do it once a year. Who has more choices in life? Who has more ability to make choices and to become what they want to be? Who has more ability to contribute to society? The people who have all of these choices that you create for them as a salesperson, as an innovator, as an entrepreneur, or the person who lived like my grandfather. There's no comparison. And this is all rooted in applying the golden rule and thinking about the needs of strangers, none of which is natural to anyone. But we've built an entire system of economics, actually, an entire set of professions around these ideas. And they ennoble us by making us put others first, even when we don't want to or mean to. I talk about the salesman as hero, and I think I do so with some justice. The salesman works tirelessly for the benefit of others. You say, well, yeah, but no, there's no but to it. You can always throw up some charity worker who does it tirelessly for a nonprofit, but does the charity worker get paid? Probably. You can always point to a doctor who works in the OR, but does he get paid? Of course he does. You can always speak of a minister at a church or wherever, but does he get paid? Of course he does. Everyone has to have their basic needs met, and there's nothing wrong with that. So there's no taking away from the salesman what he does merely because he profits by it. We all must profit, or we can't eat, we can't live, we can't raise families. That's fine. What I'm talking about is the effect of what she does. The entrepreneur, the innovator, the salesperson who goes out every day tirelessly solving others' problems. That's who you are. That's what you do. That's why you can hold your head high. I grew up in a little bitty town in Arkansas. And as things came to pass, we didn't really have anything, but my dad worked hard, and I was a good student, and I got to go to some good schools, and eventually I got to be part of the founding of PayPal, which you may have heard of. It's a little bit of a big deal. And we went from 0 to 25 million customers in just 2.5 years. It's one of the most extraordinary stories ever, and all the more so because it happened during the worst of the tech bust. And in that time, well, we certainly made money. What we really did that mattered was we solved a problem for millions of people that most of them didn't even know they had. The ability to transact business online was very primitive when we started, and what we did enabled countless hundreds of billions of dollars in commerce and millions of entrepreneurial ventures all over the world. Because let's say you are a a lady in India living in a hut, and you've got some kind of great craft you could sell to Westerners, but you don't have any way to get it to them, and no one will give you a credit card merchant account. PayPal solved that problem. Nobody was thinking about that problem. I'm not even sure we were entirely thinking about that problem, but in solving it, countless people's lives were lifted up. When you have a great idea, you are changing other people's lives for the better. It is a heroic thing. And it doesn't have to be big like PayPal. It can be very, very basic. I told you my dad worked hard. He was an insurance salesman. When you go into a guy's home, and he's 30, and he doesn't really believe he's capable of dying, and he's got a wife, and he's got 3 little kids tugging at their mama, and they're crying, and he's had a hard day at work, and he doesn't want to hear about one more bill. And it's a bill that to him sounds like a lottery ticket, because what are the chances? And you're in there and you're talking to him and you're trying to explain to him how this will take care of his wife's future, this will take care of his children's college, this will change their world if anything should ever happen to him, and it only costs this a little bit a month. It shouldn't surprise you at all, and I know it doesn't, that what they hear is, you just want my money. But I know my dad, and my wife's dad sold life insurance too. I know our dads didn't see it that way. Well, they had to make the sale. But what they saw were the statistics. They knew what would happen to that sweet little wife. They knew what would happen to those little kids tugging at their mama. They knew what would happen the day he got hit by a bus or had an early heart attack or something. They knew the statistics. They knew what they had to convince this man of to protect his own. Probably at an age where he wasn't too inclined to think that way. They don't always understand the solution you have for them. And maybe the solution you have for them isn't the right one for them. Maybe someone else has a better one. That's fine. That's freedom. But when you write that policy, or whatever it is you do, that family's now secure. Those lives are changed forever, whether anything happens or not. That wife has an opportunity to go to bed at night knowing that her husband cared about her in the most concrete of ways. The salesman can be, frequently is, heroic. Not in a way the world will recognize, but in a way that you should internalize. Not in a way that the world will applaud, but in a way that we should laud. A way that you should know, and a way that you should be able to hold your head high when your child asks you someday, Mama, what did you do with your life? And you can say, honey, I was a salesman. That's why you're here today, and we're gonna teach you a bunch of stuff throughout the day, but I want you to internalize that thought, that what you do matters on a level that is far above the dollars and cents. And the more that you fully wrap your brain around that, the more you're going to understand your place in this world, appreciate what it is that you have to offer, and do a vastly better job of it. That is more important than any of the techniques we can teach you later on. So I leave you with that, and we'll take a short break and come back for the workshops.